If someone had told me one curious question could rewrite a friendship, I would have called it fantasy. Rain drummed on the tin roof that night, the red Alder County cabin holding us in its hushed grasp. Callie faced me across the battered wooden table. Her straight life was a clean line I'd never stepped over. For months we'd lived in this remote ranch house, splitting logs, brewing coffee, growing a friendship that felt like home. But then she leaned forward, eyes on her mug, and whispered, "What do women taste like?" My heart thudded hard. The air thickened with rain-soaked earth and unspoken weight. Lie to her, I thought. Keep it light. Save what we had. Or be honest. Lay bare the truth of who I am. And risk everything in this place where judgments echo like wind through the pines. Vulnerability bloomed raw in my chest, pulling me open. No map for the ground shifting under us. Her curiosity hung there, genuine eyes meeting mine without flinching. What if this shattered our rhythm? Or worse, what if it pulled us closer? I couldn't look away. That's how it started. Secrets simmering just below the surface. We'd found this place by accident. A weathered cabin on the edge of a sprawling ranch in red Alder County's high plains. Dust clung to everything. The porch rails, the truck's fenders, even the air after a long day. I moved here 2 years back, chasing the kind of solitude that lets you breathe deep. As a woman who'd loved women since I could name it, the wide open spaces felt like home. No crowds, no judgments pressing in, just me tending the small garden out back, mending fences on weekends, and letting the rhythm of dawn chores ground me. The sunrises here painted the sky in bruised purples and golds. And I'd sit with my coffee, feeling the world's weight lift a little. Callie showed up last spring answering my ad for a roommate to split the rent. She was straight as the highway stretching to the horizon. Dated guys back in her small-town life in Idaho. Talked about ex-boyfriends with that easy laugh of hers. Blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Hands calloused from waitressing and helping her dad with hay bales. She needed a fresh start after a bad breakup, said the city felt too tight. I liked her straightforward way, how she'd chop wood without complaint, stacking it neat by the shed. Our days fell into a pattern. I'd wake early, brew coffee strong enough to cut the chill while she slept in, emerging rumpled and ready for whatever shift at the local diner called her. But there were hints, subtle as the first crack in dry earth. The way her gaze lingered when I'd stretch after a hike, muscles aching from the trail, or how she'd brushed past me in the narrow kitchen, her shoulder grazing mine, and pause just a beat too long. I'd catch myself watching her, too. The curve of her neck as she washed dishes, water droplets tracing her skin. It wasn't overt, just a quiet pull like gravity in the empty spaces between us. I kept it tucked away, respecting her straight line, my own heart guarded but open to the friendship we'd built. Evenings were our time after the sun dipped low and the crickets started their chorus. We'd sit on the sagging couch, feet up on the coffee table scarred from years of boots. Talk flowed easy at first about the ranch hand's gossip, the elk we'd spotted grazing at dusk, but lately her questions edged deeper. She'd ask about my past loves, not prying, just curious, like piecing together a puzzle. "How'd you know?" she'd say, voice soft against the crackle of the fireplace. I'd share bits, honest but light. The woman who taught me to dance under stars, the ache of goodbyes. She listened, chin on her hand, eyes reflecting the flames. That night, the storm rolled in. Slow wind rattling the windows like impatient knuckles. We were in the kitchen, rain pattering on the tin roof, the kind of sound that makes the world feel smaller. I'd just finished drying the last plate when she turned from the sink, drying her hands on a towel. The air hummed with something unspoken, heavier than the humidity. "I've been thinking," she started, hesitating, her cheeks flushing under the dim bulb. Then it came. "What do women taste like?" Her words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading fast. She looked straight at me, not joking, not backing down. Straight women don't ask that, I thought. But there she was, genuine confusion in her eyes. My pulse quickened. The room shrinking around us. I set the plate down, hand steady, but inside vulnerability bloomed, open, inviting whatever this was. "It's not something you describe easy," I said, voice low, meeting her gaze, like salt on skin after a long day, or the warmth of breath in winter. "Personal, real," she nodded, stepping closer. The space between us charged. I didn't push, just let the moment breathe. My own heart laid bare. That question hung there, pulling us into uncharted ground, her straight world tilting just a fraction. As she sat across from me, knees almost touching, the confusion settled in, thick as the gathering dark outside. Those nights after her question stretched long, the cabin wrapping around us like a secret. We'd linger at the table, coffee going cold, the rain easing into a steady drip from the eaves. Callie's eyes held mine, searching, and I let her see the raw edges of me. No walls, just the quiet truth of who I was. Vulnerability felt like handing over a piece of my heart, but in that shared space, it bound us tighter. She leaned in, her breath warm against the chill, and started talking. Not about the question, not yet, but about the cracks in her own life. Her voice dropped low, confessing how her last boyfriend had left her feeling hollow, like a fence post rotted from the inside. I listened, nodding, my hand resting open on the table, inches from hers. The wood grain under my palm felt rough, grounding as her words filled the room. Our routines drew us closer, each day, a thread pulling taut. Mornings I'd rise with the first light filtering through frost-laced windows. Boots crunching gravel as I checked the garden. Potatoes pushing through soil, carrots hidden like buried hopes. Callie joined me sometimes, her hands in the dirt beside mine, fingers brushing soil from leaves. The earth smelled rich, damp, alive, and in those moments, tension hummed low. She'd laugh when mud kicked her nails, but her gaze would flick to my arms, strong from hauling feet and linger. I felt it, that unspoken pull like wind bending grass before a storm. Evenings brought the kitchen alive again. Me chopping onions that stung my eyes. Her stirring soup on the old stove. Steam rising thick. The sizzle of butter in the pan. The clink of spoons against bowls. Proximity turned simple acts intimate. Her hip bumping mine as we moved. The heat of her body cutting the draft. I didn't pull away, letting the contact spark, my own desires flickering like embers. She carried her straightness like a well-worn coat, comfortable, but starting to have. Over those talks, I'd hear it in her stories. Dates with men who never quite fit. The expectation to slide into that life. Everyone just assumes, she'd say, tracing the rim of her mug, a new edge in her voice. I met it gently, not with pushes, but with questions that opened a door. What if it doesn't have to be that way? I'd ask, my tone as soft as the light fading outside. Her assumptions began to crack, subtle as thawing ice on the creek. She'd pause, fork suspended midway, and the room would thicken, charged with what she couldn't name. I offered my own path in careful pieces, laid bare in the firelight, how I first kissed a woman under a harvest moon, her mouth tasting of wild berries and freedom. The fear that followed, barbed wire sharp, yet the pull was stronger, undeniable. It wasn't a choice, I told her one night, our knees touching beneath the table. It was like breathing, essential once you knew. Empathy steered me. No judgment, just the weight of my story, held out like an offered hand. Her eyes softened, catching the flames, and she'd nod, taking it in. I watched something shift, small but real. A flicker of doubt in her straight world, like a shadow passing over the sun. Hints of her conflict surfaced slowly in the quiet hours. She'd drift mid-conversation, staring into the dark fields, fingers worrying a napkin. I don't get it, she'd murmur, mostly to herself. Why does it feel different hearing you talk like that? The tremor in her voice was genuine, as if the ground were moving under her. I felt the storm in her and opened wider, told her how confusion had once gripped me, too, a weight in my chest like unspilled rain. We listened then, truly, the silence between words heavy with validation. Her confessions came, the loneliness of squeezing into a mold that pinched, the curiosity that scared her. I mirrored it back. My vulnerability became a bridge. It's okay to not know, I said, covering her hand for a moment, skin warm and real. She didn't pull away. The cabin held our deepening. The rural quiet amplified every heartbeat. Wind threaded the pines, carrying sage and the feel of possibility. Our talks grew raw. We passed our vulnerabilities like tools, hand to hand. Her fear of judgment from the life behind her. My aches for love's lost to distance. Tension gathered in the domestic weave. Her laughter rang brighter when I teased her about burning toast. My pulse leapt when she leaned in to taste a spoon of stew. The straight assumptions thinned, challenged by empathy we set, brick by brick. One evening, dusk washed the sky in indigo, and we sat on the porch steps with blankets on our shoulders. The air cooled quickly. Stars pricked the wide black. Her head rested close to my shoulder, breath even. That question I asked, she whispered. It stuck with me. My heart slammed, open to whatever followed. The moment hung there, ripe, drawing us toward the edge. I turned to her, eyes meeting in the dim light, and nodded. Vulnerability led me there, ready for the experiment that would change everything. The night felt alive, waiting. Her words lingered in the cool night air, pulling us from the porch into the cabin's warmth. I stood hard open and let her inside without a word, the door creaking shut behind us like a held breath. The living room fire had died to embers, casting a soft glow on the rug we'd bought at a flea market. Faded reds and blues worn from our feet. Callie followed, her steps hesitant, but she didn't back out. That question of hers, "What do women taste like?" echoed in my mind. Genuine curiosity laced with something deeper, unspoken. I turned to her, vulnerability raw in my chest, and met her eyes. "If you want to know," I said, voice steady but soft. "I can show you. No rush, just if it feels right," she nodded, cheeks pink, the straight lines of her world blurring in the dim light. We sat on the couch close enough that the heat from her body cut the evening chill. My hand found hers, fingers lacing, tentative, skin rough from her diner shifts, warm against my calluses from the garden. I didn't push. Just let the moment build. My own desires flickering like the last sparks in the grate. "It's about trust," I murmured, leaning in slow, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her breath quickened, mingling with mine, carrying the faint scent of the tea she'd sipped earlier. Chamomile and honey, sweet and grounding. Our knees touched, then our shoulders, the proximity turning the air thick, charged like the moments before. A summer storm rolls in over the plains. I guided her gently, my vulnerability, a quiet invitation. "Close your eyes if it helps," I whispered. My free hand brushing her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Soft skin a little flushed, and she leaned into it, eyes fluttering shut. The world narrowed to us, the creak of the couch springs, the distant hoot of an owl outside. I tilted her chin up, heart thudding heavy in my ribs, and pressed my lips to hers. Soft at first, exploratory, like testing the temperature of creek water in spring. She tasted of salt and nervousness. Her mouth hesitant but opening under mine. No pressure, just the slow unfold. My tongue brushing hers in a gentle ask. The intimacy bloomed, sensory and real, the warmth of her breath against my neck, the faint tremor in her fingers gripping my shirt. She responded, tentative, her hand sliding to my waist, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, curiosity turning to something hungrier, her straight assumptions, cracking under the weight of it. I let her lead a little, feeling her explore. The way her lips parted further, tasting me back, a soft sigh escaping her. It was like the first rain after drought, soaking in deep, unexpected. My body responded, heat pooling low, but I kept it gentle, vulnerable, sharing this without demand. Her free hand tangled in my hair, pulling just enough to send a shiver down my spine. The room filled with the sounds of us. Soft breaths, the rustle of fabric as we shifted. Outside, wind picked up, rattling the windows. But inside, it was just this, her mouth on mine, discovering the taste she had wondered about. When we broke apart, her eyes opened wide, confusion flickering there like lightning on the horizon. She touched her lips, fingers trembling, and pulled back a fraction. "That I didn't expect," she whispered, voice thick, staring at me as if seeing something new. The accidental truth hit her then, sparking in her gaze, genuine, raw. The straight world she'd known, tilting off its axis. I nodded, hand still in hers, open to the storm in her eyes. "It's okay," I said, empathy flooding my words. "Feelings don't always fit the boxes we build." She exhaled sharp, leaning her forehead against mine. The warmth of her skin an anchor. Confusion swirled, but so did something else. A spark of recognition, accidental and profound. We talked then, words tumbling in the afterglow, the fire's embers popping soft. She confessed the whirl in her head, how the kiss felt right in a way nothing with men ever had. Like coming home to a place you didn't know you missed. "I thought I was straight," she said, voice breaking a little. But this, it woke something. I listened, vulnerable, sharing how my own discoveries had come in waves, crashing unexpected. No judgment, just the quiet hold of empathy, validating her shift without rushing it. Her identity cracked open, the accidental taste revealing layers she'd buried under assumptions. Tears welled in her eyes, and I wiped one away, thumb gentle on her cheek. The moment stretched, intimate, building a bridge over her confusion. But doubt crept in at the edges. Her withdrawal subtle as she sat back, arms crossing over her chest. The high plains night pressed against the windows, isolating us in this revelation. "What does this mean?" she asked, voice small. The try-fail cycle starting. Curiosity pulling her forward, fear pushing back. I squeezed her hand open still, but felt the tension coil. Our shared space, once easy, now hummed with unspoken questions, leading us into the doubts that would test everything. The morning after broke clear, sun slicing through the curtains like a blade on fresh snow. Callie rose early, slipping out to the porch without a word. Her boots thudding soft on the boards. I watched from the kitchen window, coffee mug warm in my hands, the steam curling like unanswered questions. She'd kissed me back last night, explored with a hunger that cracked her straight shell. But now denial wrapped around her tight as barbed wire. She sat on the steps, knees drawn up, staring at the frost-kissed fields stretching endless. I felt the pull to join her, my heart open, but aching with the mix. Joy in that shared spark. Fear it might flicker out. Vulnerability sat heavy in my chest, processing the tenderness we'd touched, the confusion it stirred in both of us. What if this pulled her under, drowned the friendship we'd built? I breathed deep, the scent of pine and earth grounding me, and stepped outside. She looked up as I approached, eyes shadowed like clouds blocking the sun. Last night. It was a mistake, she said, voice flat, pulling back into herself. Denial hit quick, her words a wall slamming down. She stood, brushing dirt from her jeans, avoiding my gaze. The rural quiet amplified it all. The wind whispering through dry grass, no one around to interrupt her retreat. Isolation pressed in, making her struggle feel endless, like the open horizon. I nodded without pressing, letting my own tangle of feelings spill softly. It doesn't have to be, I said, easing onto the step she'd left, the wood cool beneath me. But if it felt wrong, that's real, too. Inside, everything nodded, elation from her touch, worry for the storm I'd seen rising in her eyes. As open as I was, it hurt to watch her retreat. But empathy kept me steady, honoring her need for space without shutting down. Days slid into a pattern of avoidance, our cabin becoming a maze of measured distances. She took longer shifts at the diner, returning late with grease on her apron and weariness in her bones. I tended the garden alone, knees in dirt, tugging weeds that clung like her doubts. Out here the isolation sharpened everything, no city clatter to drown the churn, only coyotes howling at night, echoing her turmoil. One evening she tried to sand it down to normal, setting the table like always, plates clicking against the scarred wood. "Pass the salt?" she'd ask, voice forced casual, as if the kiss hadn't happened. I'd smile, hand it over. Our fingers would brush by accident and a jolt would run through me. Mixed feelings surged, hope in those small returns, frustration at the pretending. I worked it through in quiet, eyes on the ceiling beams, heart exposed to the ache of wanting more while fearing a break. Tension gathered in the shared spaces, tactile and bright. The kitchen, once easy, thrummed now, her cooking beside me, the sizzle in the pan masking quickened breaths. She'd reach for a spice jar, her arm grazing mine, and go still. Color would rise in her cheeks like autumn leaves. I felt it too, the heat of her nearness cutting the draft, stirring the memory of her mouth on mine. Rural life kept us close. Folding laundry on the couch, we smoothed sheets that smelled of sun and soap, eyes meeting by chance over the fabric. The isolation amplified the strain, no crowds to vanish into, just us and the wide land pressing our struggle inward. She'd pull away then, mutter about checking the fence, boots crunching gravel as she fled to the fields. I let her go, holding the push-pull in my chest, empathy for her denial wrestling with my own raw longing. Validation arrived in fragile flashes, delicate as first frost. One rainy afternoon, trapped indoors, she sat peeling potatoes at the table, knife flashing steady while the room filled with earth scent and the roof tapped its steady drip. "I keep replaying it," she said at last, voice low, eyes on the spiral peel. "The way you tasted, it scared me." Denial split just enough. Withdrawal softened into confession. I set my knife down and leaned in, letting vulnerability show. "Fear is part of it," I said, palm open on the table. "For me, too. First times are scary, but feeling it? That's truth breaking through." She nodded, a tear slipping free, and for a moment we sat inside that shared listening, confusion braided with the storm outside. Empathy spanned the gap, recognizing her accidental awakening without demand. Her straight facade wavered. The cycle kept turning, words drawing her close, doubt tugging her back. But it wore on us, the rural quiet pushing the inside battles out. She snapped at small things, a boot left askew, coffee too strong, denial sharpening her edges. I absorbed it and went to the garden, working it through with dirt under my nails, the soil an anchor for my mixed heart. Nights she'd toss in her room, floorboards creaking while I lay awake, the wind rattling pains like her unrest. Attempts at normally faltered. Shared meals were silent stretched thick. Her gaze flicking to my mouth before darting away. Heightened tension sparked in every brush. Passing in the hall, her shoulder against mine, breath catching. Isolation made it relentless. No buffer from family or friends to dilute the pull. But in the quiet validations, like her hand lingering on mine during a late talk, hope flickered amid the confusion. One night, as thunder rolled distant, she broke down at the table, head and hands. "I thought I knew who I was," she whispered, voice cracking. The cycle peaked, denial crumbling into raw doubt, her straight world in pieces. I moved close, arm around her shoulders, feeling the tremble, my own vulnerability, a steady hold. Empathy poured out, validating the accidental truths she'd tasted. But the crisis loomed larger now. Emotional storm building, pulling us toward confrontation in the dark. That breakdown at the table marked the turning point. Her tears falling like the first drops of a downpour. Callie's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the wood, knuckles white, her straight identity cracking wide open under the weight. "I can't pretend anymore," she choked out, voice raw, eyes meeting mine with a desperation that twisted my gut. The facade she'd worn so long, dates with men, easy assumptions shattered right there, pieces scattering like dry leaves in the wind. I slid my chair closer, vulnerability flooding me, open to her pain without a shield. My arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her in, her body collapsing against mine in the dim kitchen light. The scent of rain-soaked earth seeped through the cracks, mixing with the salt of her tears on my shirt. I held her steady, whispering, "You're not alone in this. Let it out." Empathy poured from me, validating the accidental truth she'd uncovered. No rush to label it. She clung tighter, sobs muffled against my neck, the physical closeness igniting something fierce between us. Our breaths set in the quiet, her warmth seeping through my sweater, stirring the embers we'd kindled that first night. Emotional walls dissolved, her confessions spilling fast. How the kiss had unraveled her, making every past touch with men feel flat, like echoes in an empty canyon. I nodded into her hair, my own heart exposed, sharing the terror of my first realizations, the fear of losing family, the isolation of hidden desires in a world that didn't bend. "It feels like the ground's giving way," I said, voice low, my hand stroking her back in slow circles. The intimacy deepened, her fingers tracing my arm absent-mindedly, sending sparks through my skin. We stayed like that, bodies pressed close, the rural night wrapping us in its hush, amplifying every shared heartbeat. But complications hit unexpected, like a sudden squall over the plains. The next day, her phone buzzed with a call from her sister back in Idaho. Words sharp through the speaker, judging the phase Callie had hinted at in a late-night text. "You're throwing away everything for some confusion." The voice cracked, laced with conservative fire, the kind that burns slow in small towns. Callie's face pad, handing me the phone with trembling hands, but I shook my head, letting her face it alone while I stood by. Empathetic anchor in the storm. External judgments pierced her fresh wounds, amplifying the doubt. Her straight past clawing back. She hung up, collapsing onto the couch, the weight of a family expectations crushing her revelation. "They think I'm broken," she whispered, curling into herself. I sat beside her, thigh against thigh, the leather creaking under us, and pulled her head to my shoulder. "They're scared, too," I offered, vulnerability raw. "But this is yours." Real like roots pushing through rock. We dove deeper into her fears that afternoon, rain lashing the windows, trapping us in the cabin's close quarters. She paced the living room, boots thewing on the worn rug, while I sat on the floor by the hearth, knees drawn up, open to every word. Self-discovery terrified her. The what-ifs piling like snowdrifts. Losing her job at the diner if whispers spread. The isolation of coming out in this conservative stretch of red Alder County where sap-picked truths hid like coyotes in the brush. "What if it's just curiosity?" she asked, stopping to look at me eyes wide with the abyss. "Or worse, what if it's more and I can't go back?" Her voice broke. The accidental taste from that kiss haunting her, pulling her from the straight path she'd trod so sure. I rose, closing the distance, hands on her arms, feeling the tension taut as fence wire. "Fear is the shadow, not the truth," I said, empathy steady, sharing how my own doubts had felt like drowning in a dry riverbed, parched, endless until I let the current carry me. rural metaphors with through our talks, grounding the chaos in the land we knew. It's like the creek after freeze, I told her one evening as we walked the fence line. Mud sucking at our boots, the air thick with pine and wet soil. Ice holds firm all winter, straight and unyielding, but spring comes and it cracks. Water finds its way. Hidden truths rushing free. She stopped, hand on a post, wind tugging her hair, and nodded slow. The words sinking in. Her fears eased a fraction, shared like the vast sky overhead, endless but not crushing. Physical closeness pulled us nearer still. Her leaning into me on the trail, arm brushing mine, the emotional bond tightening with every step. Judgments from afar faded against our quiet alliance. Her breakdown forging something unbreakable. Yet the escalation built, tensions coiling like thunderheads on the horizon. Nights brought us closer. Her slipping into my bed for comfort. Bodies entwining in the dark. Kisses tentative but deepening. Her straight facade fully confronted now. Vulnerability met vulnerability. My open heart guiding her through the fears. Empathy validating every tremor. But the revelation stirred a crisis pulling us to the edge. External pulls wearing with internal fire. Setting up a confrontation that would demand everything. The cabin felt smaller, charged as we teetered toward the peak. Those nights in my bed became our fragile sanctuary, her body curling into mine under the heavy quilts that smelled of cedar and sun-faded lavender. Callie slipped in after dark, the floorboards groaning soft under her steps, seeking the warmth we discovered. Intimate moments repeated, testing the boundaries we'd blurred that first kiss. Her hand tracing the curve of my hip. Tentative at first, then bolder, fingers pressing into skin like claiming unmarked land. I'd respond, open, vulnerable, my breath catching as her lips found my neck, the scrape of her teeth, sending heat pulling low, no rush, just the slow build, her straight world fading further with each touch. The cabin's walls held our whispers, the wind outside a distant howl. But inside, tension coiled tight, her exploration pulling us deeper into uncharted ground. Her awareness grew sharp, like eyes adjusting to starlight after city glare. She'd pause mid-kiss, eyes searching mine in the dim glow from the window, confusion giving way to a dawning hunger. This pull, she'd murmur against my collarbone, voice thick with the accidental truth. It's like the river carving stone. Slow but unstoppable. I felt it, too. Her attraction blooming, accidental, genuine, cracking the assumptions she'd carried like a rucksack too heavy. Mornings after, she'd linger in bed, head on my chest, listening to my heartbeat, thud steady. The scent of her hair, hay, and faint shampoo filled the space, grounding us. I'd share fragments of my own attractions, vulnerable confessions of women who'd stirred me in quiet moments, fostering trust, brick by brick. Her hand would squeeze mine. The growing awareness, a bridge we crossed together, her straight facade dissolving in the light of day, but trust demanded vulnerability from me, laid bare in every shared breath. I'd pull back sometimes, not from doubt, but to let her lead, my heart open like the plains at dawn, exposed, waiting. Tell me what you feel, I'd say, voice low, fingers tracing her arm, feeling the goose flesh rise. She did, halting at first, then freer. The way my touch ignited something men never had, a spark that scared and thrilled. Empathy flowed easy. My own past vulnerabilities mirrored in her words. The fear of labels. The ache of hidden wants. Rural nights amplified it. Stars pressing close through the skylight. No neighbors to intrude. Our bodies entwined again, her legs slipping between mine, the friction building slow, testing limits with every shift. I fostered that trust, holding her through the tremors. My openness, a steady flame against her storm. Conflicts from the conservative world outside clawed at the edges like thorns snagging a fence line. Whispers started at the diner, her taking extra shifts to avoid them. Coming home with eyes shadowed, tales of sidelong looks from the old-timers nursing coffee. They can tell something's off, she'd say, pacing the kitchen, linoleum cool beneath her bare feet. The walls seemed to press closer. Red Alder County's endless sky hiding narrow minds, judgments rooted as deep as sagebrush. One evening a ranch hand dropped by for tools. His stare lingered too long on how we stood, her shoulder resting against mine. He muttered about cityways creeping in, the words thudding between us. Callie went rigid, pulling back, conflict rekindling her doubt. I felt the space widen, my own openness tested. I crossed it with empathy, guiding her out to the porch where dusk chilled the air and first stars pierced the dark. Their words are wind, I told her, my fingers wrapping hers. They pass. This doesn't. Emotion met emotion and tightened our seam, spanning the rifts her awakening carved. We'd walk the trail at twilight, gravel crunching under our boots, her hand drifting near until it finally clasped mine. She spoke the terror plain, losing her family's approval, the loneliness of sap-picked truths on land lined with straight horizons. I listened, unguarded, and shared how empathy once steadied me too, how a woman's understanding pulled me back from my own edge. We hold each other through it, I'd say, turning to face her as canyon wind tugged our hair. Her gaze gentled. Desire flared in the way she leaned in, lips brushing mine, testing the line again. Outside pressures roared, yet our bond thickened, vulnerability feeding trust that felt like roots braiding underground, hidden, but strong. Intimate moments stacked, familiar and insistent, carrying us toward the point no one could undo. One night, thunder murmuring low, she moved with sudden certainty, hands sliding beneath my shirt, palms warm at my back, pulling me close. The bed creaked. Our breaths ran ragged. Boundaries melted in the heat. Her awareness crested. Soft sounds rose against my ear, the truth refusing to stay buried. I want this, she whispered, eyes locked on mine. No denial left. My heart swelled, tender and whole. Empathy closed the distance. But the old shadows pressed harder. A call from home that same night reignited fear. I felt her body tense beneath me. The hinge of it all hovered, crisis riding the ridge like a storm about to break, drawing us to the edge where everything must either fracture or fuse. Word count. 7:40, the storm split open. Thunder boomed like the world cracking. Callie lay beneath me, rigid from the phone call, her family's voices hanging in the room, unyielding as winter wind scouring the plains. She recoiled mid-touch, sat up in tangled sheets, back turned, shoulders knotted. Rain and our heat scented the air. Water veined the window, smearing the lightning. I can't do this, she whispered, voice torn. It wasn't denial now. It was the crest hitting with full force. The fence line of her straight life lay broken. Revelation ripped through like roots bursting thawed soil. I rose, heart hammering, bare to the dim lamp's glow glinting off the sweat on her skin. Then tell me what's real, I said, resting a light hand on her arm, feeling the tremor. No pressure, just empathy's steady hold, giving her truth room to rise. She turned at last, eyes wild with weather, tears cutting clean paths down her face. It's you, she choked, raw words breaking loose at last. This pull, this taste I couldn't forget. It's not curiosity. It's me. I've been straight my whole life, or thought I was. But kissing you, it woke everything. Women. You. Her confession landed heavy, thunder deep, shaking the cabin's bones. The impact ran through me, too, the magnitude of her shift, my own heart bared at the crossing point. Sensation and meaning braided tight. Her fingers clutched mine. Nails digging in like anchors. The air thickened with our breaths, ragged and synced. The scent of her skin, salt and earth mixing with the ozone from the storm. She leaned in, desperate, lips crashing against mine in a kiss that held no hesitation. Tongues tangling fierce, bodies pressing close on the bed that creaked under us. Heat surged intense, her hands roaming my back, pulling me down, legs wrapping around mine in a tangle of need and release. We moved together then, the emotional peak fusing with the physical. Her moans low against my neck, my fingers tracing the curve of her spine. Feeling every shiver as confusion resolved into something tentative. True vulnerability poured from me, open acceptance in every touch, whispering her name like a vow. I see you, I murmured between kisses. My body arching into hers, the friction building hot, urgent like fire, racing through dry grass. She gasped, hips rising to meet mine, the revelation sealing us. Her straight assumptions burned away in this convergence, leaving only the sapphic spark we'd ignited accidental. Sensory details overwhelmed. The slide of skin on skin, slick with sweat, the thud of my pulse in my ears matching hers. The rain pounding the roof like applause for her truth. No words needed now, just the raw empathy of bodies speaking what fears had silenced. Her cries peaking sharp as lightning split the sky, pulling me over the edge with her. In the quiet after breath slowing, she curled into my side, head on my chest. The storm easing to a steady patter. Confusion ebbed, resolving into tentative truth. Her fingers tracing lazy circles on my stomach, a soft smile breaking through the tears. This is real, she whispered, voice steadier, the accidental awakening settling like dew on morning grass. I held her close, open acceptance wrapping us, validating the journey we'd shared. No rush to define, just the quiet validation of her sap-pick path emerging. We've got time, I said, kissing her forehead. Empathy in every syllable, mirroring the resilience I'd found in my own loves. The shared sapphic truth bound us, accidental but profound. Her hand in mine, a promise amid the lingering thunder. Quiet connection bloomed in that aftermath. The cabin a haven against the world's narrow winds. We lay there, bodies entwined, the air cooling around us, stars peeking through clouds outside. Her doubts flickered still, but the revelation had forged something solid. Validation in the way she nuzzled closer. Empathy in the silence we shared. No need for more words. The storm passed, leaving the land washed clean, and us connected deeper than before. Days after the storm, the cabin settled into a new rhythm. Quieter but fuller, like the land after rain, everything sharper, roots digging deeper. Callie and I moved through our routines with a tentative closeness. Hands brushing more often, eyes holding longer across the kitchen table. The dynamics shifted subtle. No grand declarations, just the weight of her revelation settling between us. She'd catch me watching her as she stacked wood by the shed, her arms flexing under the flannel shirt rolled to her elbows and smiled that half-shy way, the straight girl she'd been fading into memory. But acceptance came uneven, laced with doubts that surfaced like weeds after a wet spring. One morning, as I poured coffee, steam rising thick in the chill air, she leaned against the counter, fingers tracing the mug's edge. "What if this fades?" she asked, voice low, eyes on the black liquid swirling. The question hung, her lingering fears raw, pulling at the edges of her newfound truth. I set the pot down, turning to her, my heart open as always, vulnerability in the way I stepped close without hesitation. "It might shift," I said, hand finding her waist, thumb pressing gentle into the denim. "But we face it together. That's the real part." Empathy guided me, my role in her healing steady like mending a fence line one post at a time. No rush, just presence. She nodded, leaning into my touch, her breath warm on my neck, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the doubts whispering from her old life. The rural setting framed it all, the endless plains outside a backdrop for this slow growth. Isolation forcing us inward where truths took root. We'd walk the trails at dawn, boots sinking into mud, softened by recent rains. Her hand slipping into mine, natural now, the vast sky overhead mirroring the space we gave her uncertainties. "Out here things grow slow," I'd say, squeezing her fingers, the wind carrying sage scent around us. Like the cottonwoods by the creek, twisted but strong. Her acceptance built in layers, doubts surfacing in quiet confessions over shared chores. Afternoons in the garden, knees side by side in the dark soil. She'd pause with a treel in hand, dirt caking her nails. "I dreamed of my sister last night," she'd murmur. The conservative judgments from that call still echoing. She called me lost. Her voice cracked, lingering fears pulling her under. But she'd look at me then, eyes searching. And I'd meet it with open arms, pulling her into a hug that smelled of earth and sweat. "You're found here," I'd whisper, chin on her shoulder, empathetic hold, easing the ache. Healing came through those moments. My vulnerability a mirror for hers. No hiding my own past scars. The times I'd questioned everything under similar skies. The deepened bonds showed in small ways. Her cooking my favorite stew rich with onions and herbs from our patch, or me braiding her hair by the fire. Fingers combing through blonde strands soft as new hay. Emotional ties thickened, her touches lingering longer, a kiss stolen in the pantry amid jars of preserves, sweet and urgent. The rural hush amplified our growth. No distractions from the world's noise, just us and the land's steady pulse. Evenings on the porch, wrapped in the same blanket. We'd watch the sun dip behind the ridges, painting everything in golds and shadows. Her doubts eased their shared like the chill air, her head on my shoulder, breath steady, acceptance blooming quiet. "I like this US," she'd say one night, fingers interlaced with mine, the stars pricking the black above. Hopeful steps followed, her drafting a letter to her sister, words careful but honest, while I sat nearby, offering nods and silences that validated without words. Mutual understanding grew, brick by solid brick, her sap-pick awakening integrating slow. The accidental truth now a path we walked side by side. Conflicts from outside faded against our bond, like distant thunder after the storm. Present but not breaking us. Yet the integration wasn't seamless, doubts flaring when isolation pressed too hard. A week later, after a long shift left her alone with her thoughts, she came home withdrawn, pacing the living room rug we'd worn thin. "What if they find out at the diner?" she asked, arms cinched tight, red Alder County's conservative undercurrent clawing back. I stood from the couch and drew her in. Our bodies fit easy now, my hands tracing slow circles along her back. "Then we face it," I murmured into her hair, empathy steady. "I'm here, open to whatever comes." She softened against me, doubts yielding to warmth. The kiss found us there, mouths parting, tongues meeting with a hunger that swept the shadows aside. In those holds, the healing sank deeper. I became her anchor in the rural vastness, our bond twisting stronger, like vines climbing a trellis. As the weeks turned, hope took shape. We planned a trip to the nearest town, to a queer-friendly bar. Fingers woven under the quilt, we talked through dreams. Understanding wrapped around us. Every shared glance was validation. The journey from her straight assumptions to the sapphic connection felt like proof of time's quiet work. The cabin seemed fuller. Our rhythm became a give and take, doubts lingering but no longer ruling. Resolution came naturally. Outside, the land mirrored our steadying, fields greening, skies clearing, roots sinking deeper between us. Morning light filtered through the window, catching dust motes drifting slow. Callie stirred beside me, her arm draped over my waist, breath warm on my shoulder. We lay there, bodies easily tangled, the quiet bond we'd built holding against any leftover gusts. No words needed, just the even rise of her chest against mine. The sapphic truth we'd uncovered settled like dew, affirming each step of her passage. Empathy lingered in the room. The scent of pine from outside reminded us that awakening isn't tidy, only real. If you've navigated those hidden poles in your own life, felt the ground shift under the assumptions you held tight, share your story in the comments. It might help someone else find their way. And if these tales of rural hearts and quiet revelations resonate, subscribe for more stories of women finding home in each other, one accidental truth at a time. By late summer, the creek ran clear again. Winter's old ice had broken months ago, but it took time for the water to find its clean path. We were like that, Callie and I, walking a new channel carved by a single question and 100 small answers that followed. We kept the cabin. We mended what we could, the loose stair on the porch, the drip in the bathroom sink, the ragged window screen the cat kept testing. On Saturdays we drove the ranch road slow and checked fence lines, pockets full of nails, a length of wire coiled in the truck bed. We fixed small breaks as we found them, hands working in easy rhythm. It felt like a practice for everything else. The diner didn't explode when we changed, it just hissed a little, the way a skillet does when water hits hot iron. Some of the old-timers stared longer. One or two laughed in that careful way that asks you to laugh with them so it doesn't feel mean. Callie went in anyway. She learned which tables tipped no matter what and which would always leave exact change. She got used to the hush that fell when she pushed through the swinging door. Over time, it shifted from hush to habit. People get tired of their own gossip. The day Dolores, who ran the register, said, "You want my extra pie or not?" Without looking up from her crossword, I watched Callie smile so small and relieved it made my throat tight. We ate the peach slices standing by the alley, juice running down our wrists, August sunlight warm on our faces. We made good on our talk about going somewhere we wouldn't feel like a curiosity. The nearest queer-friendly bar was 41 miles away, a little place off the highway where the sign just said Lantern in chipped gold paint. We went with hands linked on the bench seat and came home with the windows down, hair tangled, voices hoarse from singing along to whatever country song the radio threw us. Inside, the bartender nodded like we were exactly who she expected to see. A woman at the end of the bar told us about her late wife and how they used to dance right there, 2 beats off from everyone else. Callie asked me to dance. We stepped on each other and laughed. When the jukebox cut to a slow song, she folded herself close, cheek to my temple, and I felt her breathe out something she'd been holding since Idaho. Her sister wrote back in October. The first envelope was all edges, scripture in the margins, questions that weren't questions. Callie read it at the table and traced the paper's creases with her thumbnail until they tore. We didn't argue. We walked the fence road, let the wind take some of it. A month later another letter came. Softer. A picture of a niece in a pumpkin hat tucked inside. "I don't get it," her sister wrote, "but you're my sister." That last line mattered. Sometimes permission is a door. Sometimes it's just an open window you can breathe beside. It was enough. Winter settled in steady and uncomplicated. We learned new rituals. Callie started bringing home coffee grounds from the diner. We worked them into the garden soil with ash from the stove. On the coldest mornings we shared the same coat between the truck and the barn, her arms around me under the fabric, laughter fogging the air. At night we read out loud, essays, dog-eared paperbacks, old seed catalogs with notes from hands we'd never know. We fell asleep to the stove ticking as it cooled and woke to coyote tracks stitched like a story across the yard. There were hard days still. The ranch hand who'd made his crack about city ways needed our help after his knee went out. We hauled his hay because it needed hauling. He didn't apologize, but he didn't look away anymore, either. The woman who ran our mailbox kiosk asked if we were roommates or roommates. I smiled and said, the second kind. She blinked, then asked if I could look at her leaky hose reel come spring. Meanwhile, Dolores at the diner started saving Callie the last slice of lemon meringue on Thursdays, and the cook rang the bell twice when her order was up, some kitchen joke that meant family. Nothing dramatic changed, but the shape of resistance did. On the first warm day in March, Callie found a used greenhouse frame for cheap. We loaded the truck until it groaned and pieced the thing together behind the cabin, panels clouded with old sun, door hinges squeaking like birds. We put our hands in dirt that still held winter's cold and planted what we could: spinach, chard, a row of early carrots. I don't know what I'm doing, she said, and I told her that was the whole truth of most things. You start, and then you learn. Later, standing with the hose dribbling in her palm, she laughed. I used to think brave meant loud, she said. Turns out it's mostly showing up. By early summer, we could name what we'd made without flinching. Not an accident, not an experiment. Us. I found a ring dish at the thrift store, the glaze cracked in a way that made it look like lightning had once touched it and changed its mind. We used it for the things we took off at night: a ribbon, a bobby pin, 3 screws that didn't fit anything anymore, a small silver band I'd worn since college. The ring Callie bought at the feed store because she liked how sturdy it felt. No proposal. Just proof we planned to keep building. We invited a few people over on the 4th, ranch hands, Dolores, the librarian who'd slid an Audre Lorde paperback across the desk to me with a look that said, "This is for you." We ate potato salad and overcooked burgers and watched kids run through the sprinkler. When the sky went dark and fireworks started popping over the far ridge, Callie set her chair close to mine so our knees pressed. No one flinched. The librarian leaned over and asked if we wanted starts from her tomatoes. Dolores said, without looking at either of us, "I knew before you did," and laughed her smoky, kind laugh. Fall brought a quiet I didn't know I'd needed. We canned apples, Callie's first time, and the lids pinged one by one in the afternoon light, sharp and satisfying. What do women taste like? She asked me over a slice I'd sugared too much. The question didn't burn anymore, it glowed. I told her, like salt after a long day, like the mint you catch when you pick basil. Like coffee sipped standing on a porch with your boots untied. Like an apple you canned yourself in a kitchen you saved one stubborn sweetness at a time. Mostly, I said, like whatever you've loved enough to learn. She kissed me fingers sticky and nodded like she agreed. We still go to the lantern when we need reminding that we're not alone. We dance better now. There's a couple there, silver hair braided into crowns, who always clap for us. Once, on a rainy night, the bartender slid us a drink on the house and said, "You two look like weather that knows what it's about." We didn't know what that meant, exactly, but we liked it. Callie's sister visited in the spring. No speeches, no drama. She brought the niece in a too-big denim jacket and a bag of licorice and stood in our doorway like she'd never seen a place that held itself together with so many nails and so much intention. We walked the creek. We ate stew. That night, while Callie read to her niece on the rug in front of the stove, her sister stood next to me at the sink and dried a plate without being asked. "She seems happy," she said finally. I nodded. We let that be enough, because sometimes it is. In the second winter, the roof sprang a leak right over the bed. We slept on the floor for a week, the mattress propped against the wall like a sail. It sounds like a small thing, but the way we solved it together, pricing shingles, trading labor with a neighbor, cussing at the wind, felt like a point on a map we'd been drawing since spring. Later, lying under the repaired roof while snow came down hard and steady, Callie said, "I didn't know I could want something this ordinary." I held her ankle where it hooked over my calf and said, "Ordinary is underrated." She laughed, and the sound felt like a clean line drawn around a day. When I think about the beginning, I still see the kitchen table and the rain and the way her question hung between us like a bridge we hadn't decided to cross. We crossed it. That's the whole story and also just the first chapter of the one we're still writing. We didn't fix the county or change the diner or convert anyone who didn't want changing. We fixed what was ours, a cabin, a fence, a story we'd been told about ourselves. We built a life that tastes like the things we make with our hands and the people we choose with our hearts. This morning, before sunup, Callie rolled toward me, hair in my eyes, breath warm on my throat. "Coffee?" she mumbled, and I said, "I'll brew it strong." The world outside was frostwhite and quiet. Inside, the kettle sang. The stove ticked. Our mugs steamed. We stood at the window and watched light move over the pasture. I reached for her hand without thinking. She squeezed back. It felt simple. It felt earned. If someone had told me one curious question could rewrite a friendship, I would have called it fantasy. Now I'd say, some questions are doors. You open them with both hands. You step through. And if you're lucky, there's a cabin on the other side, a garden to tend, a creek that keeps finding its way, and a woman at your table who tastes, most days, like home.